All right, welcome back. Nice little rainy Monday to get us started off. Today, we're going to be looking at not only some American history, we're going to be looking at some North Carolina history. Uh, Here's what I would say if you guys were in class. I would start this off and be like, okay, all right, who's been to the beach before? And, you know, get a get a poll, see who's been to the beach. Most likely everybody in class has been to the beach. So then I would ask, okay, well, how many of you have been to the Outer Banks? Then I would imagine some hands would fall. Probably, usually it's about 50-50. Half the class has been to the Outer Banks, half the class hasn't been. And then I would ask, okay, who's ever been to Roanoke Island? And then most of the hands would drop, but every once in a while, there's a few that have been to Roanoke Island before, and it's because it is a part of our Outer Banks, and it is a part, obviously, of North Carolina and North Carolina history. So you guys know a little bit about Roanoke already. You probably talked about Roanoke when you were in fourth grade when you took like actual North Carolina history. You may have touched on it in eighth grade, again, when there's an emphasis on North Carolina history. Today, we're not, I guess, mandated, I guess that's the word I'm looking for, to teach like North Carolina history, but I mean, you can't teach the history of the United States and the history of again, that process of becoming the United States without talking about the colony of Roanoke. So this is going to be a little bit different than our Columbus venture, our Columbus lesson. Because there, the biggest thing for us was to figure out what factually happened, and how it happened. With Roanoke, we are focusing a little bit more on kind of what happened, why it happened. So this is going to be just kind of a basic outline. I don't want to give too much away because, as you guys already know, especially, you see my fantasy football stuff down here. Let me get rid of that. There we go. What was that? Oh, yeah. So with Roanoke, as you can already see, it is also referred to as the Lost Colony. So what we're going to do, we're going to kind of brush you up a little bit on Roanoke, and our focus is going to be on why is it the Lost Colony? What happened? And we're going to look at some theories. You guys are going to do a little bit of research, and we're going to complete our first project this week. All right, so without any further ado, let's get into the Lost Colony. Okay. So here's where I'd like to start is the significance of the expedition. Why are we learning about this? Why do we need to learn about this? Because, again, this isn't probably one of the parts of American history where you feel that is emphasized in the years leading up to American History 1, and it's not necessarily this talked about much in everyday conversation. You can look at how important some parts of American history are based on how much they're still debated upon and spoke about. If you look at the Constitution, you want to talk about how historically significant the Constitution was. All you have to do is just look around. People are debating the Constitution in politics or just everyday conversation every single day. But you probably don't hear much about Roanoke. So why do we need to learn about Roanoke? Well, a couple reasons we need to learn about Roanoke. First is that it is the first English attempt to colonize in the New World. Now, why is England important to us here? This is a British flag. You probably already knew that. I like to use flags as symbols because, again, that's what they are, and also that kind of helps us imagine these countries a little bit instead of just only the word. That may sound, I don't know, that may sound silly, but some people think in words, some people think in images. So I'm trying to provide both of them here for you. So why is England important? Well, England is important because, as we know, the United States would spawn from the 13 colonies. The 13 colonies were the 13 British colonies, the 13 English colonies. England and Britain, we kind of use those interchangeably. So if you hear me say England at one point, if you hear me say Britain at another point, I'm talking about the same place. Same thing with the UK. Like if you hear me say United Kingdom, United Kingdom embodies England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. But again, I'm talking about the same general area. This was not the first European country to colonize in the New World. Spain had begun colonizing Florida and South America into Mexico during the mid 1500s. This is what our Columbus expedition. This is what it spawned. It spawned the Spanish colonization of like the Caribbean islands, South America, Mexico, and the lowermost or bottommost states of the current day United States. If you've ever wondered why, this is just to help you out in future lessons. If you've ever wondered why, like people from Mexico, people from like South America, people from Texas, why they speak Spanish? Well, it's because the Spaniards originally colonized them, and so that language was just essentially passed down through time, and over time, in some places it has been phased out. Like most people in Texas are going to speak predominantly English, but there are also a lot of like Spanish words in Texas because it used to be part not only of Spain or not only of Mexico, but also part of Spain. All right. Anyways, this also led to further colonization by the English. So the colonization of Roanoke is going to lead to more colonization. As we've said, it is already a large part of North Carolina history because, again, this does take place in North Carolina, and it is one of the greatest mysteries in American history. And I think that's interesting. Mysteries are always fun, right? All right, so where is Roanoke Island? So, again, I would start this off in classes, who's been to the beach? And people would raise their hand. And then we would take a look at this map, or maybe we just pull up a different map completely and look at some of the beaches in North Carolina. And some people will say, well, I go to Myrtle Beach. And then, we would go down to South Carolina. But then from there, I would say, okay, well, who's been to the Outer Banks? And again, most people, it'd be about 50-50. Usually is. The Outer Banks, for those that do not know, maybe you're new to North Carolina. Maybe you're new to North Carolina, and I'm just assuming that you know everything about North Carolina and you've been everywhere in North Carolina. Not true. But what if you just don't really know? You've heard of the Outer Banks, you don't really know where they're at. Well, the Outer Banks is this long, what do you want to call it? This long trail of islands. As you can see, it is broken up in parts. Again, it's a long trail of islands, really stemming from, I guess, it'd be Southern Virginia, all the way to really the very top point of South Carolina. So Southern Virginia, Northern South Carolina. Northern South Carolina. That sounds weird, right? Using two directions there. Anyways. So these are this band of islands here. Now, Roanoke Island, which is what we're looking at, is actually right inside these bands. Right inside these bands. It is called Roanoke Island. The city there is Manteo. I'll save that Manteo story for another day. So this is in Dare County, which is going to be important for us because we're going to find out kind of where that name Dare came from in just a little bit. All right, so we've got some basic information so far. So let's look at the background here. Okay, so to start off, we are looking in the year about 1584. So again, we've fast forwarded about 80, 90 years. Well, I guess 70 to 80 years. So Queen Elizabeth I, this is of England, of Britain, agrees to grant a charter to Sir Walter Raleigh to create a colony in the New World. Now, again, Spain had been colonizing the Americas. Portugal is on their way to colonize some of the Americas. France, again, they're going to be on their way to colonize some of the Americas. It is England, in this case, that is going to try to create a permanent colony. Now, what's the purpose of this colony? Well, we're not going to get into it too deep just yet because this is going to kind of be some of our research. But one of the main reasons for this colony was, again, to make money. there is a lot of resources in the Americas that are not available to Europeans. We really need to look at a American and European map to really get to know exactly what that means a little bit better. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll look at that. We'll look into that a little bit more tomorrow about the resources. But so Sir Walter Raleigh, that is this man right here. I'd also, if we were in class, I'd say, "Hey, anybody know what city Sir Walter Raleigh is? What city is named after him?" And then people would raise their hand. I know. And then I'd call on the one that wasn't paying. I'd call on the one that was paying the least money, least. And I'm struggling. The least amount of attention. And I would say, "Hey, what city do you think Sir Walter Raleigh is named after, or the city that is named after Sir Walter Raleigh?" And they would say, "Charlotte." And I would say, "Golly, get out of here. Get out of here." But obviously we know that Raleigh is named after Sir Walter Raleigh. Now, so I've highlighted the word charter. So what does charter mean? Essentially, it means that it's kind of almost like a loan. It's a loan to Sir Walter Raleigh to establish this colony. If he doesn't do it by 1591, then it's no good. It's no good. Can't do it. So he has a time frame he has to abide by. He also, again, has to find a way to make some money here because essentially he's paying this back. We ain't going to talk about loans today just yet, but the more money you owe people, the worse it gets. So, having a loan, especially for this, you want to make sure you're making that money back because, again, the amount of money that's going to be spent here is going to be large because you're going to need people, you're going to need supplies, you're going to need ships, you're going to need food. There's a lot. So, got to find a way to make some money here. So, there is a couple expeditions, 2 to be exact. The first expedition, Sir Walter Raleigh. Now, I want to make this clear. Sir Walter Raleigh, this guy right here, this is my dude, Sir Walter Raleigh. He never steps foot in the New World. He never steps foot in the New World. Instead, he is essentially the let's just look at it like this. He's the organizer. He is kind of the businessman behind the scenes. But he himself is not leading this expedition. Raleigh instead finds people to lead this expedition. Again, he is going to send them out. They are going to, again, gather resources, create a settlement, and they are going to send supplies back, resources back. Sir Walter Raleigh is going to make money this way. Okay? So, Sir Walter Raleigh, again, at this point, he's just Walter Raleigh. But Sir Walter Raleigh sends 107 men to Roanoke. Now, that is the island that we had just been speaking of. There had been more and more maps to be created and released over the course of time between Columbus, or really Vespucci, and the expedition here that we see in 1585. This was generally mapped out, so they did have a pretty clear idea where they were going and how much time it would take. Now, why Roanoke? Well, Roanoke, one thing that Roanoke has is because it is inside that outer band of the Outer Banks, it has some protection. It has some protection. So, you could see people coming from the coast, or you could, like if the English were really worried about the Spanish. We're going to talk about that a little bit more here in just a minute. But the English were very worried about the Spanish, and they needed to be protected from the Spanish. So if the Spanish are traveling the Atlantic Ocean, again, they can kind of see them from afar, and it also gives them time to kind of fortify. Because, again, they have to actually sail in between the Outer Banks to make it to Roanoke. So there is some protection there. Anyways, Raleigh sends 107 men to Roanoke. This is 1585. Is led by Sir Richard Grenville. Then I would ask, all right, what city was named after Sir Richard Grenville? And then again, I would get the answer of hopefully Greenville. But I'm telling you, I've heard Greensboro, and I'm like, come on now. That's not who Greensboro is named after. We'll talk about him when we get to the American Revolutionary War. So this expedition led by Sir Richard Grenville, this expedition led by him, Again, he had 106, 107 men, 107 including him. They reached Roanoke and they struggled to survive right off the bat. Now, a couple reasons here. Number one is uh, I don't know how I want to rank these. I guess number one would probably be conflict with the natives. Colonization had been happening essentially since Columbus. So, for about 80 to 90 years, colonization of uh, the Americas had began. And natives, while many different tribes, there are many different native tribes, some of them absolutely hate each other and went to war with each other, as we spoke of with the Columbus expedition. Some of them, again, more peaceful. But anyways, word has traveled. Word has traveled over 80 or 90 years that these Europeans are coming over and they are, again, they are settling in land. They are extracting resources. Now, some of the natives are going to make allies out of the Europeans. Some of the natives are going to make enemies out of the Europeans, and vice versa. You know, the Europeans sometimes they would settle somewhere and would be friendly with the native population. Other times it would be the opposite. Again, largest thing here I believe is language barrier, because language barrier then kind of restricts, it kind of puts that culture barrier. It kind of restricts it because you can't break that culture barrier without breaking the language barrier. It had to be able to communicate. So they struggle to survive. They got conflict with the natives. They are running low on food. They're having a hard time growing food. So they actually have to abandon the colony in 1586, and they're actually taken back to England by Sir Francis Drake. I would make a good Drake reference right there, but I'm going to leave that. I'll do it some other time. So the second expedition. So they get back to England. And again, Sir Walter Raleigh has to have this happen. He has to make some money to do this because, again, he's already sent one group out. They haven't returned with barely anything or hardly anything. So again, he has to find a way to make some money here. So he has to find new people, or at least people that are willing to go back, and they have to find a way to create a settlement, survive, have some food, again, for some, just so they're not starving, settle things over with the natives. So again, they can begin taking some resources, extracting some resources. The resources we're talking about like gold, silver, lumber, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. But again, that is a big portion here. That's a big part of this story. We have to realize that. So Sir Walter Raleigh sends 115 colonists led by John White. John White, at this point, I believe he is in his 50s. He is an experienced sailor. Now, White, when he sends Raleigh, when he sends John White and the colonists to Roanoke, again, they return straight to the island in which they had already been. White realizes that they need more supplies, that what they have is not going to be enough. Now, here's what's going through John White's mind, and we have to think about this. John White is essentially responsible for these 115 colonists. Okay? So John White is the one in charge. John White also has his daughter and his granddaughter with him, or excuse me, I already messed this up. John White has his daughter with him. His daughter is pregnant, and during this time in Roanoke, John White's daughter, Eleanor, is going to give birth to a child, and that child is going to be named Virginia. Now, John White, again, he realizes he has to go back. Now, while this is about making money, this is also about creating a colony. So he orders the colonists he puts some type of structure there for them in terms of how to handle problems, who's in charge. But they also need to build physical structures. They need to build some type of fort, some type of settlement, again, to keep them protected. John White leaves and goes back to England. Now, this should only take really about 2 months, 2 months tops, and that is like the actual like sailing, the gathering supplies, and actually sailing back. So about 2 months time. So John White leaves, and the Roanoke colonists are again they have to find a way to survive. When John White gets back to England to restock, White cannot return. Now, here's the problem. The Spanish and the English have been going at it for a long time. The Spanish and the English were mortal enemies at this point in time. And colonization of the New World was a large part of it because both of them want some piece of that pie, right? So what happens is that White returns to England, and England is at war. Now, again, this is why we're going to look at a little bit of European geography tomorrow, because we kind of need to know what Europe looks like so that we can better understand this story. The Spanish have the largest and most dangerous naval fleet in the world, known as the Spanish Armada. The Spanish Armada they have surrounded England. And so John White, when he returns to England, his ship is actually taken, but not taken by the Spanish. It's actually taken by the English. They take his ship because they need to kind of divert or revert its purpose. Instead of this ship being used to go back and forth to the New World, to the Americas, this ship is now going to be used in war. This ship is going to be used to fight off the Spanish Armada. It was essentially all hands on deck because, again, the Spanish Armada was the largest, most dangerous military naval fleet in the world. So John White, he goes back to England, and his ship is taken from him. And he is not able to return for 3 years. So for 3 years' time, John White is not only, again, getting the things that he needs, but he is also stranded. He's stranded in his own country, and he cannot return to Roanoke. He has left his daughter, he has left his pregnant daughter in Roanoke, along with 114 other people. He knows that he has a granddaughter, and that, again, you would imagine that he's really conflicted here. Imagine being stranded from the people you love when they believe that you're supposed to be returning quickly, and you can't. You can't. Essentially, you're imprisoned within your own country. And so for 3 years, this has to go through John White's mind. This constant, honestly, I don't even know how you live like that. That turmoil, that constant turmoil that's going through your mind over and over and over and over again. But finally, after 3 years, John White is able to return. John White is able to return to Roanoke after 3 years, when it should have taken at most 3 months. 3 years later, John White is able to return to Roanoke. And I can only imagine that the entire time there's this pit in the bottom of his stomach, this like queasy feeling almost. It's like, will I see the ones that I love? Will I be able to reunite with them? Or what's going to happen when I return? That would be another thing that would be going through my mind. What's going to happen when I return? I've been gone for 3 years when I should have been gone for 3 months tops. So John White returns to, there we go, Roanoke. Now, I need to get rid of this. Yeah, let's hide that. There we go. So John White returns, and he finds that the colony is abandoned, and he finds that there are no clues. There are 2 clues. There are only 2 clues. He searches the island, and he finds that there is the word Croatoan carved in a fence post. Croatoan, Croatoan, and it is all in capital letters. And there is also the letters CRO, crow, carved in a tree. Now, this is the most infamous drawing or portrait or painting of John White in the Lost Colony. But as you can see, this is a little bit different than what our notes say. It says Croatoan in a tree. But that is not true. That is not true. That is something that is there more for dramatic effect. But when you see this, it is speaking of the Lost Colony, even though it is not 100% quite accurate. Either way, whether this is 100% accurate or not, it is important because it does kind of lead us in the right direction. The word Croatoan. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island in the area. Again, a lot of this had been mapped out, and there were communications between the natives and the Europeans, especially in terms of like land. There were conversations there, but in terms of like cultural, traditional practices, that's where the language barrier really hits a snag. So White goes to search for the island, but White is unsuccessful. While he is sailing through the Outer Banks, there's a horrible storm that pushes the ship out to sea. This was actually during the months of August and September. And as we know, this is hurricane season. And hurricane season, we're seeing hurricanes in the Atlantic Ocean right now. Hurricanes can be extremely deadly, and especially during this time period, really up until like the past 100 years, hurricanes have been extremely deadly. And and it still happens. Like hurricanes of large proportion still have the ability to kill people, which is it's wild. It's wild. It's just a storm that forms in the ocean that can leave millions homeless in a couple hours. Either way, a horrible storm pushes a tropical storm, hurricane, a large storm pushes their ship out to sea, and they can't return. They can't return. They get pushed out to sea, and again, they are essentially in a bad spot to where they're going to have to go back to England in order to take. Because at this point they're going to need people. They're going to need search parties. This was just John White sailing back. John White and the few crew members that he had are not going to be able to fend themselves off if they come into conflict with the natives. So they have to return because they have not found their settlement. They have not found the colonists. But once John White gets back to England, he has left behind his daughter, his granddaughter, and at least 110 colonists. Now, this would not be the last time that the Roanoke colony would be searched for. England isn't going to completely abandon Roanoke. There is going to be another search going, but John White is not going to be one of these people. And John White dies knowing that he left behind his granddaughter and his daughter in the New World and never saw them again. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this disappearance. Now, I've just tried to give you an outline, which is kind of hard because I want to explain more of it. But at the same time, I need to kind of leave some room there for you to do some research, because I don't want to steer your research. I want you to kind of steer the research. I just want to give you just a brief narrative. So done that. So here's what I want you to do. You should be commenting on this video. I want to know, again, why are people drawn to the ocean? That's going to be important for us because, again, that's essentially how we connect to this. Because, again, this is part of our beaches. We are drawn to those, but for what reason? I think there's something deeper there, but I just want to know why you think that. And then I want you to read the link that I've given you, or read the theories under the link I've given you. There are 8 theories, or 8 popular theories as to what happened to the Roanoke colonists. I want you to read those, go through those, and just get an idea of which ones you think are most plausible, because we're going to be building on those as we go on this week. All right, thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow. This is always the tough part because I got to go through and do all this again.